Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Meanwhile Back on the Podcast. I'm Frank McGuire.
I'm Kristina DeMatteis.
I'm Saba.
We've got a great episode lined up for you guys today. But before we jump into that, I just want to thank all of you for being here and spending your time with us. Now, whether you're a longtime listener or this is your first time tuning in, we appreciate you guys all the same. But for those of you that are listening to us for the first time, let me tell you a little bit about who we are and what the show's about. We are a fandom culture, speculative fiction loving collective who rarely see eye to eye, but unanimously, we all champion open, nuanced, and thoughtful conversation when discussing our favorite made up shit. And week to week, we're going to share our brand of raw, hard-hitting commentary, news, film, and game reviews from all of your most beloved corners of fandom. Now, on today's episode, we got a spoiler hot review of Deathstroke, Knights and Dragons, one of the newest feature-length animated offerings from DC and Warner Brothers. The film was adapted from the CW Seed animated series of the same name and written by one of DC Animation's most prolific creatives, J.M. DeMatteis, who I had the pleasure of sitting down with to talk about the film, and you'll hear that interview at the end of this spoiler hot review. So be sure to stay tuned for that. He had a lot of things to say about his work on this film, and you guys don't want to miss that. Saba, why don't you give us a little synopsis of the film?
Sure, Frank. So mercenary and master assassin Slade Wilson leads two different lives. One as a relentless killer known as Deathstroke, and the other one as a dedicated family man. But of course, like all things do, those worlds will collide. Forced together by the vicious terror group known as Hive, it is the killer and Slade who must fight to save his loved ones, as well as what remains of himself. With his soul torn apart and his young son held captive, Deathstroke will have to atone for the sins of his past to fuel the battles of his future.
Well done. Well done. Nice. Sounds like a good movie, as far as the synopsis goes. But we'll get farther into what we thought of the film as we move through this review. So let's go around the table. I want to get everybody's initial thoughts after watching this movie. And how many times did you guys watch it?
I just watched it once.
I've seen it about 1.5 times. There's a reason for that, though. I started watching it. My little niece was sleeping over, and she was in bed, and I was going to start watching it. And then she was like, "Can I watch it too?" And I was like, "No." She's like, and I was like, "I don't think it's a kid's movie." And she looked at me, and she's like, "It's a cartoon." And I was like, "Oh yeah, but not really." So I didn't really let her see much of it at all, actually, which is really good.
It gets
because like
violent
the first,
pretty quick.
Yeah, because it gets into it real quick, and I guess we'll talk about that. But I ended up watching a little bit of that night, but I started again for this episode because I really wanted to get into it and did the full thing through again.
Awesome. So, Kristina, what were your initial thoughts on the film? What was your initial takeaway?
I liked it. I thought the pacing was pretty good. I liked most of the characters' development. Yeah, I kind of enjoyed it. I thought the reviews were a bit harsh. I kind of read some reviews after the fact, and I was just like, oh, okay, well, I kind of liked it more than other people, I guess. So,
yeah, I'm starting to think that people who have the power to review are just being dicks for the sake of being dicks now. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I just feel like people are forgetting what movies and story are really for. And I don't know, but that's just my take. Saba, what were your thoughts? What was your initial takeaway from the film?
I was like, wow, like it got, rated R real quick for this movie in terms of like, even stuff we've seen in DC animation before. So it's definitely something that, it's not a movie that you kind of watch in the background or something. It's like it takes your attention right away, especially just from the opening. And we'll get into different characters that we like and stuff. But I really do like the opening sequence and sort of the conversations that happen really sort of set the tone very quickly of what kind of man Slade Wilson is.
Yes. No, I feel the same way you guys do. I did enjoy the film. The pacing was pretty breakneck at the beginning for sure. And it was definitely juxtapositioned with another scene that kind of set a completely different tone, like Saba was saying. But I liked it. And I really thought that this had a very interesting stylized look to it. There was a lot of little little nuances in the animation style too. I don't know if you guys picked up on this, but you guys know I'm a fan of that old school halftone look. And those halftone dots were used in all kinds of different places within the animation structure. And you almost had to like keep your eye out for it, but it would pop up every once in a while. And I thought that it was really well produced. And again, the art style was very captivating and really pulled the eye in. And this, I really like the story. I love what Jean-Marc DeMatteis was able to do with Deathstroke as a character. That was one of my big takeaways from the movie. So yeah, no, I think it's something that is definitely worth discussing, and I hope people give this film a real chance. I think they should, I think everybody should check it out before
I thought all the characters had like a good amount of depth, and in terms of the animation too, I like the use of shading and like shadows and that kind of stuff too. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, so let's get into this story. So, the synopsis pretty much kind of summarizes everything. Slade is leading this double life. His wife and son do not know that he's this, mercenary, like super assassin. And even his wife doesn't know that he has the powers that he has, because she's under the impression that the army's experiment failed on him. But he knows, like he found out later on post experiment that he actually got powers from it. And he decided to use those powers to become this mercenary, Deathstroke. And he has to, his family more or less pays for the sins of the father. The sins are visited upon his wife and his son. And this hive group comes out of nowhere and wants Deathstroke to work for them. And they kidnap Joseph, and this story kind of ensues from that point. And we see a couple time jumps in it too. So how'd you guys feel about the story?
I will say the beginning, and as I mentioned, like that opening scene, where Slade is talking to Addie, his wife Adeline Kane, who is like another prolific character, but it sets the scale it sets it up really quickly, where it's like, you've cheated on me before, so that's kind of discussed. And then the whole like idea of her not knowing, that was the one thing I wondered how much of that was like willful ignorance on her end, because there's that thing like woman's intuition or just intuition. And if like this character in the comics or anything at all, for her not to suspect, oh, I'm doing business, and not even like asking more questions or digging deep, that was something that like I was wondering throughout the movie. Because as we see this character progress, we know this is a character that is very capable, is not a damsel in distress. So I found that angle kind of interesting as well. But that beginning, it kind of really gets you and sets the scale. He shows you very quickly where he's about when he is there to like kill this guy who's the leader of the this revolution, and he's like, well, I killed the president instead because he's doing all these bad things. You better not do the same. So it's like, okay, so you killed like the bad guy, but you also killed like all these other people. And for him to not think there was going to be a repercussion, or that someone wouldn't trace him back, is naive on his part as well, at least.
Yeah, no, I like that you brought up that kind of counterbalance point that the writers put into the story, where, he's sent in to kill this corrupt general. And then there's this other general where Slade decided to turn on him because he was less of a good person than the general that he was sent to kill. It really kind of, added a lot of gray to the moral makeup of this character, right? And it really kind of made you think, and really gave it a lot of depth too.
And he does get called out for that. He gets called out for not being as good as he thinks he is.
Yeah, no, he does. He gets called out by the Jackal, and he gets called out by his family, and he's fucking delusional. He's basically delusional of who he really is. We hear him refer to himself as a knight, a number of times, and that he's fighting dragons. He is the dragon. That's the problem, is he is the dragon. But it's just, it's a sense of just disillusionment. It tells you how disillusioned the main character really is. But the method that the writers used to essentially humanize Slade in juxtaposition with some of the other characters, especially the Jackal, was was intriguing. It was definitely thought provoking the way that they did that. And it really kind of, again, I think that these characters had a pretty good amount of depth to them. I don't think that they were these two-dimensional characters. And it's kind of ironic because we're talking about an animated program. So, an animated film. So, but yeah, no. Any other thoughts on the story?
Yeah. So, just in response to Saba's comment about how Adeline was maybe willfully ignorant, I think she really did want the idea of the family. She wanted to be retired from their life in the military. So I think part of that was willful blindness. But then as soon as Jackal came to her home and beat her up, like she knew that everything was a lie. Like she knew that, and she didn't even, Slade tries to lie to her more, and she doesn't even give him a chance to lie to her more. She says, I know you're lying. Like, what are you trying to do here? Like, I'm not stupid. And also, I think they could be good liars because they were military. So I think they both would have the capability to hide their true whereabouts and what they're really doing.
Their true intent. Yeah, no, that's definitely within their skill set. Like, as far as deception, that is definitely within their skill set for sure.
So and she like slapped him like crazy. I was like, "Girl, look at you go!"
Oh, backhanded him
with her arm that like wasn't broken. She, like while all her other limbs are broken.
And then he goes to help her, and she's like, "No, I'm fine." I'm like, I love that actually, and it really just and even moving forward towards in the story, you really see that like essence of her. Like honestly, she's a really standout character for me in this movie for sure. And then I'm kind of talking about story. The scene that kind of got to me the most, which always kind of gets to me, is the scene where he has to like choose to save his son or not, and he's like obviously he's like I'm not going to like listen to you, and then like I'm not going to like go along with whatever just because you tell me to, just because you have Joseph. Like he thinks he can save him, and that's just that scene of Joseph in his arms and and he's like saying like you're not going to die, and that's always like very heart-wrenching. I would say that's a very humanizing moment for him because that's like the weight of his actions have directly caused this. Yeah,
the sins of the father are being visited upon his children. Yeah, that's basically the main through line throughout this entire story. And then you definitely get this vibe of like this dysfunctional, totally fucked up family throughout the entire story. Like it's literally cool. Like just a fucked up family. And then we learn that the Jackal is a fucked up family, or the Jackal has a fucked up family too. Because the woman that died in that face off with Slade, that was his daughter. So like again,
a daughter he didn't know that he had because he had an affair with someone when he was on one of his missions.
Yeah, and even the Jackal has a fucked up family because the woman that he sent in, like in that first kind of showdown with Slade, or before Slade has that moment that Saba just talked about, where he goes to save Joseph and he ends up getting his throat cut. He had to fight off Bronze Tiger and that other woman. I don't know who that woman was, and even identify her. I don't recognize her from any DC franchise or property, so I don't have a name for her. But that turned out to be Jackal's daughter. So he's sending his daughter in to try and kill a trained assassin. So, he's definitely not father of the fucking year.
Yeah, I know. And we kind of see even after, like, I do think, like, Addie sending her son away after that, I think to go to school, and I think it was like Sweden or something. Yep. Like, what he needed was, to have a, like, mother there, like a family member. But I think it is very, like, military. Like
I was gonna say that must have been her military mindset, being like, okay, let me get him as far away from us as possible because that's gonna lessen the chances of him being found, I guess, by someone.
Yeah, that's probably part of the motivation behind it, and I love at the end how you kind of can use the Rose character and almost balance or kind of parallel the two relationship dynamics with Jericho. Rose has this relationship with Jericho that is kind of what seems to be rooted in love, but there's definitely an underlying current of manipulation underneath it. And then you look at Slade and you look at Adeline, and they love Jericho, but they weren't there for Jericho. And one of the reasons that Jericho is even with Rose and with Hive is because of the lack of attention or the lack of support or the lack of whatever, just not being there for Jericho. That's one of the reasons why he's even with Hive. So it's kind of interesting how they balanced those relationship dynamics between those characters.
And I have to say, I love when Adeline kind of tricks Slade. That was really fun.
Oh,
for
with
me.
the kiss,
with the kiss, he
yeah.
thought the kiss was real, and then it turned out to be an implant. That was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, no, for sure.
There was another moment I really liked was when he told her, "Oh, okay, we get to team up, but you know, I prefer you as my partner because I've seen you naked," or something like that.
Yeah, he makes
and
a
instead
joke,
of like
yeah.
giggling or something, like some kind of weird response, she's just like, "Fuck off," and she jumps out of the plane. I love that.
See, I know. Okay, so you know, Deathstroke is a great character, right? Like, and he's mostly known to people through other people's content or through other people's stories or other mythos. You know, he was basically the big bad when the Teen Titans were first introduced, and he definitely crossed over into the Batman world, and you know, became part of like the bigger, you know, group of evil supervillain kind of groups. But whenever you kind of see him in his own media, like when or when you see him in Young Justice or any of the DC animated properties outside of this particular one, Deathstroke is this very stoic kind of yen spouting, you know, kind of, you know, Kung Fu the Legend Continues type of personality, right? But you know, the writers here did a great job of really adding a lot of layers to him. He's kind of more of an army grunt than, say, like the Zen Master type. Did you guys pick that up?
I thought he was more of a soldier than a general or something. Sorry, go ahead, Saba.
Oh no, I was gonna agree. I definitely do think that he is more of the army type. He seems like more stoic. It seems, you know, like he's not a man of many words, but you can tell that with his family he is different. And there's a lot of like people like that. I could describe my dad like that, although he does not have a double life of murdering people. Although you can't be sure, you know.
You can't be sure.
He doesn't have a cell phone, actually, my dad. So when he goes places, we don't know where, like,
sketchy,
where he'll be. But usually he's in the garden. So, but yeah, I do find him to be like it's more stoic is the word I would use to describe him in terms of. And another thing I kind of want to talk about though, in terms of like showing his like, you know, his goodness, I guess, or like his idea of good or bad, is the scene. I think it takes place 10 years later. So after, you know, Joseph has that accident, he hasn't seen his family, and he's going into this like really awful house that does not have windows or anything, like this decrepit house. And you know, he's fighting these people and killing them, and this person's like, "Who sent you? Like, how much money?" And he's like, "I would have done this one for free." Right? And you wonder what it is, and then you see in the basement of this house like these young girls that are just like stuck there. And so that's like another thing where he's like, "I would have just done this case, like I would have done this either way," you know, which, you know, it is like he wants to do the right thing. He knows that's horrible and doesn't want to see something like that. Yet when those girls are walking through the house, there's like blood splattered everywhere, and it's so kind of horrific, you know, to see. Even though he's done this deed to save them, you know, it's like, does the means justify the ends, sort of thing. I think that's like the thing I pull away from that.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. That's another great character beat in this movie that really gives you another side of Slade Wilson or another side of Deathstroke. You know, it's these little beats, these little subtle beats that kind of show you that, yeah, this guy is paid money to kill people, but he still has a heart and he still has some humanity. And that's what a good writer has to do when dealing with a villain as his main protagonist, because Deathstroke is a fucking villain. And, you know, it's a delicate balancing act. You know, you kind of have to put him into some very gray areas. And I think they did a great job of that.
But do you think he really has like humanity or like a warped sense of it? Because someone with humanity, like, what, like, you know, and the acts that he does are so kind of horrific. Like, you know, when he like cut off, you know, that one general's head and just had it over, like that kind of stuff, you know, really, you know, it really, I'm not really sure where he stands. It's like more than just like graves. It's like there's like a lot of stuff. He sort of
provided a justification for that, though. He was like, "Oh, this political leader was not autocrat, I guess." And
yeah, he seems to explain every time he's brutal. Like he almost, but I get where Saba's coming from. Like there's a scene where he cuts a dude into literal like man sushi. Like he or her like man sashimi.
Oh yeah, that was gross. Yeah.
Fucking amazing. But as far as the visual experience of seeing that scene and how it was drawn, how it was executed, it's incredibly done. But no, it is gross. Like this is a brutal movie. They're like this is not your typical DC animated feature. There's more blood, more gore than I've ever seen in another DC animated film. So, but
one of the reviews I read compared it to Mortal Kombat. So that was
a Mortal Kombat fatality. Those are like fatalities.
Yeah, they compared it to the fatalities.
Oh my gosh, 100%.
It was a review on Superhero Hype. So that was pretty funny.
Wow. Oh my gosh, it's like a Johnny Cage. But yeah, 100%.
But they were also the ones who gave it such a cutthroat review. They gave it a 2 out of 5. So
wow.
Yeah, they just felt like the movie fell flat compared to Deathstroke, character from the comics. So I'm not too familiar with the character from the comics, so I don't know. I can't make that comparison, but
yeah, you know what? My immediate reaction to hearing that, you know, these guys weren't happy with the translation from the comic book, the only thing that comes to mind to me is that they didn't like that Slade was so not the stoic kung fu master. Because that's really what Slade has always been. He's always been this stoic kind of type of kung fu master. But the writers here have really given him like another dimension to his personality. Like, look at the way he trades jokes with Wintergreen. Look at the jokes that he's trading with his wife and his ex-wife.
Yeah, he definitely reminds me of a dad. Like I get that vibe.
There's like some dad humor in him. Like he's like Deathstroke with dad jokes, you know? There's a lot of those. But it does humanize him more, you know? And Deathstroke is a hard character to write for. Like it's really hard to write for a character that doesn't say much. I'm sorry, but that's it, you know? It's almost like going back to Kill Bill and trying to like rewrite those characters.
Yeah.
You know, those are tough characters to write. So I take my hat off to the creative team. I think that they did a good job of humanizing a character that is known for his brutality, his stoicism, and his, you know, just his sense of vengeance and violence.
Yeah, and I can see that too if you do compare him to but I've seen him in other media as well. I mean, you know, Slade Wilson was also heavily featured inside Arrow season 1 and 2, and his depiction there, you could also argue, was, you know, a little bit different than what we've seen in the comics as well. And so, you know, I think the comics are, you know, we see a lot of adaptations where things kind of change and the characters kind of change. But I think the essence of him is still clearly there, at least for me, and what his character is. To me, it was stranger to see just the kinder side of him, you know, if you can call it that. I have an issue calling it the kind side, but you know, I know that he is loving, but even his love in a way is very intense. I wonder if that's been, you know, if the drug that he has, like, that's affected it as well, you know, like the depths that he goes to. But at the same time, he does leave his family for 10 years, and I wonder if any part of that time he was wondering about them, or if he was watching over them or not, or maybe just was like, you know, I need to stay away for good.
Adeline calls him out for that too, though. She's like, where were you? Did you like wonder? Did you check in? Like, you didn't really fight to be part of your family. Like, you didn't fight to see your son.
Yeah, he's like, I could scare you away with an email. There's like, you know, there's like another man would have like fought, you know, fought to stay in his life. But I think deep down, Deathstroke knew that like his family was safer without him in the picture in a way, right?
Yeah, if he was going to keep doing what he was doing, I think that makes sense.
Which
and then
he did.
Even in terms of his love, like even though he's in love with Adeline, he has the affair, and then he tries to justify the affair. He's like, oh, you know, I just had to make sure that you're actually like the right woman or something. Or he's like, I didn't know until after the affair that you were the right woman for me. And it didn't mean anything
you're dealing with an alpha male that has, you know, incredible amount of power and no, I'm not making excuses for him. I'm just saying that's the character, right? Like,
and she calls him
I don't really see Slade Wilson as like a loyal character. Plus, in the comic books, this is a part of his mythos, right?
It is,
because that's how Rose Wilson is born, right?
100%. So I can understand in terms of that he has just gone through this like life altering thing. In my head, at least when I saw those scenes, it seemed that like he was going to stay there and wasn't going to leave and was just going to like run away into this life. That's what it kind of like felt like. And then he changed his mind and was like, I'm gonna go back, you know. And this is like going to be the whole like Friends debate: were they on a break or were they not? When he's like, you know, you go off, stay in the military, and like they might be having that conversation for a while. But it's
For those of us that watch Friends, yes.
yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, I guess. The way I interpreted it was that they had plans for the future. It seemed like they were in a
Yeah, they were
relationship.
engaged. You're right. That's right. And that's 100% right. Ladies suck for more reasons than one.
And I mean, it was only a year. She was only like finishing her last year of her work, I guess.
Yeah. But if we kind
But
yeah.
no, go ahead, Saba.
Oh, I was gonna move it along to like him meeting up with Joseph, for like him. That again. So you can, if you have another thing to say on that, I'll wait until I do that.
Yeah, no. I was just gonna say, I was gonna ask you guys if you could have seen this story play out the same way if they didn't give Slade these little character beats of humanity and tenderness, you know, because I don't think it would have been the same thing. I think because Slade is such a villain, and because Slade is such a master of violence, like they almost had to give you these moments just to even try and relate to him, right? Like if you didn't get that, you couldn't really relate to the character. So I think that was almost a necessary creative decision to have as part of the story. But that's my take. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think also because the other characters are so strong, maybe he kind of gets washed away a little bit in like their strength and their character development. Like he doesn't really grow. He kind of just stays the same, and everyone else kind of like grows a little, or has, you know, there's all these plot twists involving the other characters. So yeah.
Well, if we kind of like push forward, I think the biggest shock to his system is sort of the scene after. So obviously, you know, what ends up happening is Joseph ends up being kidnapped or taken by Hive, and that's obviously why, you know, Addie and Slade end up meeting up again, and he sort of starts doing info and realizes the Jackal is not dead, and he, you know, concocts a plan to go save his son. And he is, I mean, there's no other word for it. He's backstabbed completely and utterly.
Yep.
And the hatred in his son's eyes for him, who now goes by, like, now obviously Jericho, as we know him as, you know, you can tell, like, it gets to him in a way. Because, like, Joseph looked at him, like the hate was very palpable in the face, or even disgust to a point.
Yeah, no. And I like the way that the Hive Queen described Jericho to Slade. Like, she's like, you're a handgun. Jericho is like an atom bomb. Yeah. Like, as far as comparing them, as far as like, you know, their yield, like, you know, how much damage can they, you know, like how much damage can be done here? You know what I mean? He's just trying to communicate to him exactly what's kind of at stake. Like, those were the stakes. And then at that point, you're kind of in your head like, oh shit. So this kid is like a total powerhouse, and they're going to use this kid. They're a terrorist organization, and they have a kid that's being compared to an atom bomb, which is kind of nuts. So, but yeah, no, I get what you're saying about Jericho is definitely has a lot of resentment for his family, 100%. But then as we move down the story, we figure out who was able to kind of foment this resentment in Jericho. And I think that the choice for it to be his sister makes a lot of sense, because I think to get that kind of, you know, to get Jericho to align against his father, there needs to be somebody who uses, maybe not uses, but, you know, through some sort of genuine connection can kind of get to him in a way that he would turn on his family, you know, and that's his sister, who turns out to be, you know, Rose Wilson, the daughter of this woman that Slade had the affair with at the beginning of the film. And
in her defense, like, his parents did not make it hard for that turn to happen.
No, I know. I know.
And it's completely, like, kids do this all the time, like finding solace somewhere else. And, you know, for them, like, to have this connection through their mind as well.
That was really cool when they kind of explained that like, you know, they found each other with this psychic connection before they even physically came together. I really liked that part. I really thought that was cool.
Because I think otherwise it wouldn't make sense. Like, she was living in a totally different country that, like, probably
True.
He would have had to visit or had a desire to visit for some reason. So yeah.
True. And she's got powers of her own. She's got Slade's powers, which is this super amazing, incredible level of agility and strength and you know, extra honed senses. You know, Deathstroke is basically a killing machine, and so is Rose. So, and here's the crazy thing. just a kind of a sidebar to this interview I do with JM. But JM, I asked him, I was like, how much influence did you take from Titans from this? Because in season 2 of Titans, both Rose and both Jericho are characters along with Slade Wilson. And he's like, none. I took none. Like, I didn't even know that this was a storyline in this season of Titans. I was like, wow, okay, interesting. And then where my head went immediately was DC is trying to not only, use what I would call their version of Deadpool. Well, I think I'm almost positive that Slade Wilson came first. Yeah, he did. He totally came first. Deadpool is kind of an answer to Slade Wilson in Marvel. But, I think with the popularity of Deadpool and I think with the cancellation of the animated series, I think DC saw their opportunity to kind of give fans something kind of to replace, like a placeholder, and that's why they kind of turned the heat up on, bringing Deathstroke out into, different forms of media. He showed up in television, he showed up in film because he was at the end of Justice League. I don't know if everybody remembers that, but he was in the cutscene. He was at the end credit scenes in Justice League. So there was 3 versions of Deathstroke and being used across multiple types of media, Young Justice, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that was definitely a big part of their motivation to want to get Deathstroke out into the mix, out in front of people so they could experience him as a character. But also, I think this has a lot to do with the popularity of villains in general. Like, look how well received Joker was. Look how well received Thanos was. I think people want a different experience with their antagonists, with their protagonists now. They want something different. And I think with a villain, you can instantly give that to people.
Yeah, I mean, there's something charming or not appealing in it, but this is like, so Superman was always a hard character for me to kind of like growing up. I mean, I definitely consumed a lot of media with Superman, but he was never one of my favorites because he just seemed too perfect,
Right.
And I know in later years that's sort of, they've gone more into struggle and everything else, but
yeah,
that people like that because they can relate. Like, all of us have this thing inside of us, or this line that we're teetering in between, not as extreme as Slade Wilson's, hopefully, but this sort of idea of what good is and what's bad and what it means to be that. And so I think that's like a little bit more intriguing than just your, vanilla good guy versus bad guy, with these different layers, these colors. And we've seen that a lot in media. And so I think the anti-hero is sort of becoming more popular. I think people see themselves maybe more in that.
Yeah, no, I think so too. And I think it's also an opportunity. It's almost a vessel for some of the frustrations we're all feeling too. You know what I mean? Thanos, obviously this is a movie review for Deathstroke, but I think that this applies. When we hear Thanos' mission in Endgame in Infinity War too, we can't help but sit there and kind of nod our head a little bit and being like, you know what? The planet is, the universe is a little overpopulated.
Okay, I gotta
disagree.
It wasn't
so overpopulated.
I did not.
Well,
I was like, that's a dumb
I don't think I could
that.
ever relate to Thanos.
I don't
put him in that anti-hero dark gray area. I feel like he's a villain. His methodology for achieving his goal is horrendous, right?
But genocide is not an answer.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is the reasons he's doing it, the reasons he thinks it's necessary, right? Those are what makes sense. And those are the only things that make sense. His actions.
Has logic.
Right. They're all logical. They're all very reasonable, logical reasons for the reason to do it. Do you do it? No, you don't do it. You find another way, right?
And that's why people are scared of robots. It's because they're all logic and no emotion.
True.
And you see that also explored in Star Trek a lot. They kind of explore that with their alien characters.
Right. Did you guys really like the art design and the aesthetic? What were your thoughts?
I liked it. I felt that it was appropriate in a rated R animated movie. I kind of liked how it was something in between North American and maybe anime style. I kind of thought it had a little bit of an anime vibe, which is kind of cool. Yeah, I liked the way the characters looked. I liked their expressions. I like the color palette the color palette was really cool. It was very even when it was meant to be menacing, it was a very subtle menacing. That's what I really liked about the actual And the
yeah,
glowing, they like made certain things glow, like
True.
With the powers and stuff. So that was kind of cool. I actually liked the fight scenes. I thought those were pretty detailed and
Yeah.
like they were physically accurate.
Well
I think.
choreographed too.
Yeah, they seemed to make sense. Like nothing was like, oh, the physics of that are weird, and they seemed to like be really specific about the moves that they were doing. Like someone trips someone and throws them, or twists someone's arm and flips them, or so that was kind of cool.
Yeah, big shout out to the director Sung Jin On, man. He killed it as far as, putting together some fight scenes that were just visually, delicious. Like they were great. They, they really gave you everything you were looking for, whether it was blood and gore or just like some really, premier, martial arts or whatever you were going for. You really kind of got this with this movie for sure.
And I thought the blood and gore also wasn't over the top. They did like some crazy things here and there, but I felt like
the man
spread them
sushi
out,
was kind of
so.
nuts. The man sushi
that was
was
nuts, but then they didn't do it again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He didn't. Yeah, they did it once, and you were like, "Whoa!" And then they got creative. Other people died in different ways. So.
Yeah, within like a 3-minute period, you had man sashimi, you had blood raining down on Deathstroke with a really weird look on his face. For some reason, I felt that look behind the mask. I don't know if you guys did, but I felt like it was a very strange look. And then you had him showing a guy's head, and I was like, this is like all in 3 minutes. And then and then within like the next 10 minutes, he took somebody's arm, he killed somebody.
Yeah.
Like it was pretty brutal. Like it's definitely up there with the opening scene of Deadpool.
It reminded me of Kill Bill or something.
Yeah, well, no, it has that vibe to it. It definitely has a Kill Bill vibe to it for sure.
But I did feel like they spread it out well throughout the movies, so it wasn't like
yeah.
I will say that scene where Addie's like arm gets like broken in her leg. Like I'm so bad with that. Even like the snapping noises. Like I can't. I'm not good with corn guts. That was like a lot for me. And then even after with the words when she was all like, "Don't touch me, I'm fine." I was like, girl, you need to go to a hospital. Like, we need to get you there right away.
But she's also trained for those kinds of scenarios, like torture, right?
Yeah.
Like, she would be trained for that. So.
And there was even, like, the scenes that with Jericho, Joseph himself, when Rose was kind of, like, getting him to, like, hone his skills and everything. And he, she was like, get this person to shoot someone. And he was like, I don't want to do that. And then, it ends up turning up a little worse. And I was like, man, like, you would have been okay with just, like, the one person out. Like, you really took them all out. When he,
the way... Go ahead, Saba. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, sorry. I was saying, like, the way he kind of, like, made them all fight in the end ended up being much more brutal.
Yeah, no, for sure. Were you guys impressed with the way that they illustrated Jericho's powers? Because I was. I thought that was probably one of the more visually tantalizing things about this film was the way that they illustrated his powers. The colors they used, the fact that they made his eyes glow and shit, it looked really, really dope. I really liked that. Okay, so performances. I want to talk about performances because this is a great voice cast. Incredible voice cast, led by Michael Chiklis, who was playing Deathstroke, Slade Wilson. Now, are you guys fans of The Shield? Did you guys watch The Shield?
I did not.
No? Okay.
No.
All right. That's sad. So one of the things that I noticed about this characterization of Deathstroke was the similarities between Deathstroke and Vic Mackey, who was the lead character in The Shield, who Michael Chiklis also played. Again, another character with a very, leading a very dual life, two identities, one identity that faces his family that's, very sanitized and, daddy dearest and all that kind of shit. And then this totally corrupt cop who's willing to do anything to serve his agenda, whether it's whether it's exacting justice or whether it's getting drug money or whatever his goal is, he's willing to do whatever it takes, and he literally does whatever it takes in this TV show. So I think that the casting was perfect for what they were going for with Deathstroke in this story. Michael Chiklis really brought this character to life, and I thought his voice performance was incredible. I don't know if you guys felt the same, but I thought it was pretty amazing.
I have to say the standout for me is Adeline Wilson. I think the voice actor is Natasha Alexander. Yeah, I thought she did, I thought that was an amazing job, and her character felt so captivating in everything that she said as well. That was actually, quite the standout for me in terms of like the actual like voice acting. I thought she did an incredible job.
Yeah, no, I thought she was great too. Honestly, though, I think, you know, when you see a character and the voice just doesn't match up with the way that they kind of look, I just felt that that was a little bit off. But I liked the performance. I liked the actual physicality that she put into the role, because you can hear her, like she's definitely in the voice booth, like, you know, with balled up fists and throwing punches. Like you can hear the physicality in her performance, but I just don't feel like the aesthetic matched. I don't know whether, like, she kind of had like this East Coast American accent, and I just didn't picture that with this character. I don't know. Just didn't jive with me. I don't know.
I think Adeline was one of my favorites, and I liked Rose as a character. I'm trying to remember the voice. Like, I don't know, the voice doesn't like stick with me, but I did enjoy the performance of Rose. So yeah,
Rose was good. I thought Rose was good too. The only problem I had with Rose is she killed Lady Shiva in hand-to-hand combat, and that just does not happen.
Well, Lady it wasn't like a one-on-one fight, right?
No, I know. He like almost stabbed her in the back or like something like that, but yeah, I know.
She stabbed her in the back of the neck while she was fighting with Adeline.
Right.
So she saved Adeline by stabbing Shiva in the neck.
True. But still, Shiva is supposed to be pretty formidable. So, but that's just the comic geek in me, you know, kind of being a little bit too critical. But yeah, no. The other character that stood out to me, and I really want to get into this because I feel like this character isn't much different than Slade, to be honest. Maybe like a hair's degree of separation, is the Jackal. The Jackal and Slade are almost exactly alike, except for this sense of you know, anarchy and like this sadomasochism that the Jackal kind of has. Like he's kind of, what do you call it? A nihilist. Like he's very nihilistic about, you know, the way that he sees the world. Like he doesn't really care about anything. He doesn't seem to give a shit about fucking anything. It just, the world is very black and white to him, you know? What was your take on the Jackal, guys?
It was like he was kind of looking into reflection. They are very similar. Just maybe, I wouldn't say opposite sides of the spectrum, but just, you know, they both believe what they're doing is adding to some sort of greater good in a weird sense. I mean, I don't think either of them really are. Like if you're standing on the side of right or wrong, if you're looking at it black and white like that, but they are very similar to each other. It's funny that they don't. I don't know if they don't see it. Well, Jackal pointed out actually at one point, right?
Yeah, Jackal says it.
Like he says it.
He said it's just a matter of scale that's different. He says we're the same. It's just the scale is different. You're not dreaming big enough.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's exactly, and I think that's that's a perfect summarization of the degree of separation between these characters. It's not a lot. Right? Like I don't see the Jackal, you know, no matter what his motivation is, you know, going to some sort of child sex dungeon and saving kids the way that Slade did. Like I don't think he would care that much, you know, and I think that's kind of why these little story beats were in this story, was to kind of, you know, widen that separation between Slade and the Jackal. But and
I think the Jackal's more interested in world domination than anything else, and that's not the motivation for Slade. Slade's motivation is kind of just, I don't know, he's picking fights based on political motivations or personal motivations.
Well, he's paid. So, he's a mercenary.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So again, that's something that they have in common, right? Yeah, but
and not power, I guess. But he's also kind of like interested in, he doesn't want to live like the life of just a family man. Like that's not enough for him.
Right. And with, you know, with a death grip, he's holding on to the last shreds of his humanity, right? You know, you hear Adeline say that you've been compartmentalizing these parts of you, you know, over your life, and you know, you're completely forgetting who you are. You know, so I think that's a big part of it too, is that he's holding on to these shreds of humanity. I think that's where the Knights and Dragons book kind of comes into play, is that he still has enough of himself that he can see himself as a good person, but he's delusional about it, without a doubt.
It's the way he justifies it. So it's like the dictator hired him to do a hit, so he took the money, did the hit, but then killed the man who hired him to do it,
and killed the worst out of the two.
I didn't agree with his political alignment or whatever, and okay, so that makes it okay.
Well, he killed the one that was a bigger piece of shit.
Yeah.
Like the one that was like, you know, doing the most harm out in the world.
But
Like
so
he made
in a
judge,
yeah,
jury, and executioner.
exactly.
Yeah.
So in a sense, he's kind of deciding like who lives and who dies. Yeah.
Exactly. What'd you guys think of Jericho's performance? I really enjoyed Jericho's performance, and the voice actor Griffin Puatu really brought him to life. I think really gave a lot of emotion to that character and a lot of depth to that character. That was my take. And then I think Wintergreen was a nice little bit of comic relief. He said some funny things, but you can tell that he's got that very Alfred kind of vibe to him. And he's played by Colin Salmon, who is from the Arrowverse, because he's Oliver's stepfather in season 1 through 3, I think. Yeah,
I love him.
Yeah, he's great. He's great.
Sorry, on the point of Jericho, I saw Jericho maybe as like the damsel in distress for the first part of the movie, but then when he turns on Slade, you're like, oh, okay, so he's thinking for himself and he has his own ideas and motivations. And then I thought he was going to be manipulated by his sister, and then he wasn't. They had this whole plan the whole time to take out the Jackal. So yeah, that was kind of interesting.
I do think that he sounded like young compared to them, but in a way that made sense. Like he still sounded like a kid. I mean, so did Rose, but even more so where you can kind of understand like how kind of maybe impressionable he kind of was, I think.
I could see Rose being the more experienced one in terms of like life lessons though, because she was like living in the streets for a while and stuff too. So
fighting for money too.
I think that made sense.
She lived her dad's life too. That's crazy, right?
It's not like she was a child. She never had a childhood. So it kind of made sense to me that she took, I don't know what the age difference was between them. I didn't calculate that, but it kind of made sense that she felt older to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that scene at the end where she realizes that this whole time she's thought that she was, she was better than Slade and Adeline. And she realizes that she's just as guilty as, treating Jericho the same way almost, like, well, not in the same way exactly, but like her, her failure to Jericho is a lot different than what Slade and Adeline's is. Hers is like this, this twisted mission of, manipulation for her to get back. Like she's using Jericho as like a weapon, for her own ends, which was definitely an interesting twist to the story. Now let's talk about this final scene because it's like straight out of fucking James Bond, right? Like straight out of James Bond. Wingsuits, little James Bond-esque little devices to magnetically, grip yourself to the side of an airplane. Very James Bond. That's kind of what my takeaway was from it. There's these hive agents with jetpacks with wings on them and shit. I don't know.
Yeah, it really did. I would say go out with like a bang of sorts with that, and it definitely, I mean, it's showing like other skill sets as well. Like we've been seeing like a lot of the comment that we saw for most of this movie was kind of very bloody and everything else, and it like Slade Wilson wasn't really facing anyone that was a match for him,
Yeah.
In terms of like the people he was facing like before we kind of get to this scene, and then having everyone there kind of fighting as well, like having his children there, and then also like Adeline, like this whole family. I was like, man, this whole family is definitely gonna need therapy after this too. I mean, they needed it before as well, but it wasn't. I always like in movies when like people all come together in some sense, like good guys and bad guys. Those type of scenes.
When they were fighting as a family, for a moment, it reminded me of like a fucked up Incredibles.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it could be.
I don't know why. I just thought of the Incredibles when they did like the family team up, and I was like, okay, but like very different vibe. But yeah, in terms of the technology, it like fit. I barely noticed it. It didn't like. I wasn't like for or against it in one way or another. It kind of just like made sense where they used it.
Yeah, but what about the choices made for this extra double cross at the end? Like there was a couple double crosses here. Jericho double crosses his dad, and then at the end, Rose reveals to Jackal that she's double crossing him and that she wants Jericho to basically take him out. But then she finds out that the Jackal was preparing for this. So his suit is all upgraded and he's basically going to try and take both of them out. And then that's when this fight ensues. And then Shiva gets killed as she's fighting with Adeline. But yeah, there's like all these like there's this back and forth of double crosses and betrayal like throughout this entire movie.
No one's telling the truth.
Normally I hate that, but given like the characters' backgrounds, it kind of makes sense. Like it makes sense that Rose double crosses the Jackal. Yeah, she knows that he's bad, and she doesn't agree with. And she felt like she was old enough to realize he was manipulating her. Like, and she didn't have a choice. It's not like she had choices about whether to go with him or not. And then, so that made sense. Like, of course, she resented him. It made sense to me that, like, the one that made less sense was Jericho trusting Rose. But I guess if they had a psychic connection, I guess that could make sense that he would pick Rose over his father. And then for sure, it makes sense that the Jackal foresaw that Rose might turn on him because he knows that she was kind of like, they're not by choice, right? So he probably would have made a contingency plan for that if you're going to, like, force this person to, like, I don't know, do your will. So. Right.
And she knew, or when apparently, like, you know, Rose says when they had the psychic connection, she realized what the Jackal did to her brother too. That was definitely a part of her motivation for this revenge plot. But yeah, all this back and forth was, you know, it was justified. Like, you can't say that the actions of the characters weren't motivated. So
I would have not liked it if the Jackal didn't see it coming. I think it makes sense that the Jackal saw it coming because he's got like at least 30 years of experience, life experience and work experience on Rose. Like he should have had a plan for that. Like,
true. And he doesn't trust anybody.
Yeah.
Like he clearly doesn't have any faith in any human being or any sort of healthy relationship with anybody. Like, you know, you don't really get a sense of that character, like, you know, having any sort of human relationship with anyone.
And I like his reaction to it too. He just tells his people, okay, guys, like on to plan B then. Like just execute plan B instead.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they're going after the president. And then the president comes out of left field in Air Force One, which was interesting. But yeah, no. And then there's this last fight scene with the Jackal and Slade, and they fall out of the air, or no, he blows up the airplane. They go out the side of the airplane, and then they basically tumble down to the earth, and Slade like uses bombs on the Jackal as they're falling and blows them out of the sky. And that's basically the end of the film. So what did you guys like about this film, and what did you guys not like about this film?
I really like the characterization of Slade Wilson in this, only because, I mean, everything is his fault. And it's fairly clear to see, like, with everything that is going on. But I do like the way that he connects the characters. In terms of, like, scenes, I really liked, you know, that opening is very much stays with you. That's very shocking. But I also do like the bond that Jericho and Rose have, because even though you can say it's based off manipulation, maybe not, there is, like, love there. And I'm a sucker for a happy ending. So when, you know, Rose is kind of accepted into the family, I find that nice. And then and then also, you know, maybe a part 2, because as Slade washes up on those shores, we could tell, you know, if you don't have the body, he's not completely dead. You know, if you can't find, like, right? That's basically a rule of thumb. And I kind of like how the movie ties in together, because that's the first scene that we see too, right? It's him washed up on the shores. So it's like he's remembering this whole thing in a sense.
Yep. Yeah. No. What were the things you didn't like about the film?
Didn't like. Okay, so this is why I'm not a huge blood and gore person. I don't know if you realize this through this conversation, but I
think I've picked that up from you over the year. Yeah.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, so I really like Game of Thrones. So whenever I got like too bloody or gory, I'd be like, oh, I can't see this. Like, I would like cover my eyes. And cartoon gore apparently is not any better. So those scenes, while I do understand, it's sort of to showcase his brutality in it. But the thing I will say, while I do like Slade Wilson, I do like the characters around him maybe a little more. The surrounding him. Cool. Like, I do think that the depths they go to, and maybe because Slade Wilson is like a stoic character, that might be why. I mean, you definitely see layers to him for sure. But, like, you know, Jericho and Rose and Adeline, like basically his family members, like those stories I find very compelling as well.
I specifically liked Adeline's character and the way she just like deals with the shitstorm that she finds herself in. I thought that was pretty great. I think she has like sort of a grace about her, but also like she's driven by logic. She doesn't get like too emotional. She's kind of just like, okay, you fucked up, but we're gonna fix it, and don't get any ideas. We're not getting back together. Fuck you. I care about my son, and we're gonna work together to get my son. So like I thought that was pretty cool. I liked that it was a story driven by kind of like a mother's desire to save her son. So that was kind of interesting.
Mhm.
I did like the fight scenes. I'm also not a huge gore person, but I didn't mind it here. I thought it worked. I like that. So yeah, and so the fight scenes and like the way they were drawn, I think was really cool. And I guess I do like the plot twists. I thought the plot twists kept it interesting, and they made sense. They were kind of like grounded plot twists. They weren't too crazy. You didn't see them coming, but at the same time,
You didn't see them coming. You didn't predict. You didn't predict any.
You saw
of them?
every single one of those coming.
No. I'm not saying I did. I'm just asking because of like whenever there's a plot twist, I always want to know who saw it coming because.
No, I didn't think that. I thought that Jericho was going to be happy to see his dad, and
I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, I didn't see that coming.
I didn't see that one coming.
We didn't know a lot about Rose, so I didn't know. I didn't expect that one either. And then I guess I didn't expect the Jackal one, but I liked that the Jackal did a counter twist to Rose's plot twist. So yeah.
Yeah, they were playing. They were playing 4-dimensional chess. What didn't you like about the film?
So I did feel that Deathstroke was kind of washed out. The characters around him were just so strong and had so much development. I would have liked to see him develop a little bit more. But as Saba mentioned, he's not dead at the end of the movie. So maybe we see more character growth for him in a sequel. I'm not sure. I think he's not angry enough. Like it just seems weird that all this bad stuff happens around him and he's so angry that he can go kill people, but he's not angry enough about the bad things that happened in his own life. Like that to me didn't really make sense. So
I think that's I definitely think that's a just observation. Yeah. No, he was definitely emotionally more in check than I thought he would be. But
just
again,
your
that
whole
just
life
maybe
just
is
went
training.
to shit, and like you really don't care, but you care about killing a dictator in South America. Like I don't know, that to me was weird. But I guess we kind of get a glimpse into his motivation. I think it's silly that he's like so influenced by this knight character that he would read to his son that he like quotes it so much. Like I don't know, I thought that was a little silly, but yeah, overall cool. I enjoyed the film. I just would have liked to see maybe stronger motivations for Slade's actions and maybe stronger reactions from him.
Gotcha. So the big standouts for me, the things I really liked about the film was the actual character development of Slade Wilson. Just because I've never seen him like that before, he actually had a more identifiable personality. Like I said, in other media that I've experienced the character of Deathstroke or Slade Wilson in, he's always this very stoic, Yenism kind of spouting type of character. He's definitely still got that discipline, like super disciplined type of guy. Doesn't say much. I felt like this one was more humanized without a doubt. And I think that's a credit to the creative team. They really did a great job of humanizing him and balancing that with the casting of the character. Because like I said, if you're a fan of The Shield, you can see the similarities between Vic Mackey and Slade Wilson within this performance. And I don't know if that's what Michael Chiklis was going for, but he knocked it out of the park. It was just a brilliant performance, and it really gave the character a lot more dimension than the traditional Deathstroke that I've seen or read about in comics and graphic novels. So I was really excited to see the character get that much input and to be that interesting and that compelling. I like the family dynamic. I thought the family dynamic was really cool. Basically this fucked up family where the sins of the father are being visited upon the rest of the family, and vice versa. Like it's almost like all of Slade's sins come back to haunt him, whether it's his son, whether it's his daughter, whether it's the woman that he slept with, et cetera. Just well executed, a very cool story. The animation was fantastic. I really liked the stylized way that it was drawn, and obviously the action sequences, the action design was really amazing. Definitely kept your kept you locked on the screen. You wanted to see what was going to happen next. I remember rewinding a couple times to see if Slade actually cut that guy into Mansushi, because I wasn't sure. So, it was, well executed as far as visually. And the other thing I really liked about it is just the voice performances overall. I really thought those were great. And the twists and turns of the story, great pacing. So, I think this is definitely one that, any DC animated universe fan should go out and check for sure. The things I didn't like about it, one of the things that kind of stands out is there's a couple of plot beats that don't make sense to me. The one with the Jackal, like, why was the Jackal even, at a point in the final battle, Slade asks him, why me? Like, why are you coming after me? And that's when they realize that Slade killed his daughter. But the Jackal came after him first before the daughter died. So it really didn't make a lot of sense to me. I thought that could be better structured, better timed out to actually make more sense. I don't know if you guys picked up on that, but that was kind of my takeaway.
I didn't pick up on the timing of that. The timing kind of confused me because they jumped everywhere.
Wait, I'm pretty sure that the Jackal sought him out because he wanted him to do something for him. And then
he wanted him to be in Hive, right?
Yeah.
Like, but when he says, why me? The answer shouldn't be because you killed my daughter. It just didn't make sense within the continuity of the story, right? So if it was like, oh, you're the greatest killer on the planet, and I wanted you to be more like me or something like that.
He says that after the fact, though.
No, he says it on the plane during the fight.
He says on the plane. He's like,
the final scene, yeah.
But the why me wasn't, to me, that why me, and maybe I'm seeing it a different way, wasn't a why me, like, why do you want me to be part of Hive? It's like, why are you coming after my family still? Why are you doing this? And him being like, oh, because you killed my daughter.
Yeah, I know, but he came after Joseph long before he killed his daughter, too.
But he came after Joseph and was like, I won't hurt your son if you do this thing for me.
Yeah, that made sense. Yeah, it was like a manipulation.
Yeah, but then I think if he didn't do that thing and then took his son back, I don't think he would have, sought such retribution. But the fact that in the meanwhile of doing that as well, he also killed his daughter, where he's like, okay, well now I'm going to get even. At least that's how I saw that story beat. So because to me that kind of made sense, but.
Yeah, no, I get that. I just think that the loss of the daughter could have been better prioritized, or
they could have
better placed in the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm. Like I kind of missed it. Yeah. It was like just a beat, and I was like, I barely even remember it.
Yeah, so, that was really one of my only critiques, as far as, I guess you could call it a plot hole, a story hole. I don't know, but yeah, no, I thought it was overall a pretty good film, and I was happy with it, and I'll definitely go back and watch it again. It definitely gave me, it forced me to be more interested in the Deathstroke character for sure. I may go back and read some comics and, check out more of his stuff, but yeah, no, I definitely recommend it. I think everybody should go check it out. If you guys were going to rate this film out of 5, what would you give it?
I give it a 4.5. I enjoyed it.
4.5?
Yep.
I was going to say 4.
Yeah.
Saba?
Yeah, I guess around 4. Yeah, I'm not good at rating movies by scales. But yeah, I would say around there. Yeah, it was definitely something. It's definitely not the type of movie I usually watch a lot, in terms of, or at least used to seeing in sort of the DC world as well. So that definitely took me by surprise. So even for that alone, to sort of recommend to people, and really taking that jump. And I wonder, if we'll see other movies kind of go down this lane as well, and maybe explore these, I guess, darker corners of the DC universe.
I think we see more villains coming out in the pike, obviously, with Black Adam. They're doing a feature film for Black Adam. Mm-hmm. He's been featured in animated stories too, so I wouldn't be surprised if we get more villain stories for sure. The Killing Joke is about the Joker. It's not really about Batman, so, and Killing Joke was a popular animated, well, was it? I don't know. The fans were kind of up in arms about it a little bit, but I liked it. Anyways, this is the end of our spoiler hot review. I hope you enjoyed it. Coming up next, I'm sitting down with DeMatteis, the writer for Deathstroke, Knights and Dragons. So stay with us. I think you guys will enjoy this. Hello, everyone. I'm here with the esteemed, prolific, and Eisner Award winning comic book scribe, DeMatteis. JM, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Awesome, man. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. It really means a lot to us. As my regular listeners know, we're in the process of talking about your 1997 Daredevil treatment that you did called The Man Without Fear. So we're going to talk to you about that. And we're also going to talk about, obviously, this new project that's live and available right now on Google Play and Amazon and all these places where you get all your streaming goodies, which is Deathstroke, Knights and Dragons. For people who may not know about you or your work, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work and kind of run me through some of the catalog that has kind of catapulted you to this fame?
Oh, dear Lord, to this fame. Yeah. It's so funny in this business, like we're very, very famous in this very, very narrow niche. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's, I guess, it is a kind of fame, I guess, but it's weird to think of it that way. So let me try to telescope a 40-year career into a couple of minutes.
Sounds good.
I actually started out as a musician, playing in bands, as a lead singer, rhythm guitarist, main songwriter. I still write songs. I still play. In fact, one of the things I've been doing during the lockdown is doing some demos of the many songs I've been writing in recent years with an eye toward going back into the studio and doing some recording. So music was always a big love, but whether I realized it consciously at first or not, the lifestyle of a musician was not for me. I am much more suited to being alone in a room playing with my imaginary friends. And I sort of transitioned from playing in bands to doing music journalism. I wrote for a lot of different music newspapers. I did a little bit of writing for Rolling Stone.
Yeah, I read
that. But always loved comics. Always loved comics, and always
Awesome.
wanted to get into comics. When I was a kid, my first passion was art. So I spent most of my childhood drawing. I'm not telescoping this down to 2 minutes too well, am I?
It's all good, man. It's all good.
And then, the writing sort of took over. Long story short, after knocking on the door for several years in a variety of different ways, I sold my first comic book scripts to Paul Levitz at DC.
Okay.
In those days, you broke into the comic book world at DC by writing for their anthology books, Weird War Tales, House of Mystery, House of Secrets, all those books. And so through Paul, I got my career underway. Soon was working with Paul and then Jack Harris and then Len Wein, who became both a dear friend and my first real mentor in the business. At a certain point, not long after that, I was offered a contract at Marvel, went over there thanks to Jim Shooter. And over the years, I've written there's been my comic book career. I've done live action television and a very long career in animation as well.
Cool.
So between the comics and the animation, I've had a chance to write the vast majority of these characters over the years, as well as doing many, many creator-owned projects like Moonshadow and Seekers into the Mystery, and more recently, The Girl in the Bay and Impossible Incorporated, as well as, writing some books. So between, comics opened the door for me to not just to comics, but to TV and film and books and all these other wonderful opportunities that have come along over the years. And there's really too many to list. So it's been a great ride, and it continues to be a great ride because I continue to be busy and creative and generating new things every day.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing. And, as a fellow creative, I'm happy to hear that someone has had such a prolific career to kind of play in all these different sandboxes, because that's what I kind of hope for myself too. I really love animation. I really love comic books. I really love film. That's kind of where I really got bitten by the writing bug, was, wanting to write screenplays, because I don't know if you find this, but the prospect of writing a novel was just way too intimidating for me.
Mm-hmm.
Just like it just, the demand and the prose is just, it's not as easy as playing in the screenplay sandbox, I would say, for me. Like, I just
I think that's I think for some people would probably say the exact opposite, that they would be much more comfortable writing a novel than writing a screenplay because they don't understand the form. It's a very specific form, and you have to tell a story in a very specific way. So, but I understand what you're saying. Having done both, having written some books and also toiled in the screenwriting fields.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, before we get into some of the screenwriting you've done, because we're going to talk about Knights and Dragons, I just want to say some of your work is very personally familiar to me. The one that stands out the most is Craven's Last Hunt, probably lauded as one of the greatest Spider-Man stories of all time. And I love it. And I read it almost I want to say like every 2 or 3 years. I try and read it at least once.
Wow.
Yeah, I really like it. Like I just really like it. And the characters that kind of resonate with me are characters with a sense of duality or kind of living in an almost paradoxical existence. And I find that this story kind of has a lot of that.
Right. Well, you sort of put your finger on one of the themes of my entire career. That's because I remember being like 17 and reading Dostoevsky and being just completely blown away because of his understanding of the duality of human nature. And I've always been sort of obsessed with that in my own work as well, along with many other themes. But that's one of the big themes. And I love any character filled with that level of contradiction and that push-pull between the dual sides and sometimes triple and quadruple sides of our nature.
Yeah, and it allows us to play with so many different narratives in society, whether it's science or whether it's religion or whether it's, politics or whatever. Like there's all kinds of different, layers that we can put on these characters to make them more interesting when they have that dual nature to them. So
for me, there's three big wheels that I tend to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
There's the emotional wheel, there's the psychological wheel, and then there's a spiritual wheel, or you can call it a metaphysical wheel. Maybe the metaphysical wheel is even bigger than the spiritual wheel. So you can take the lens and tilt it in all those different directions when you explore one human being. And that to me is what's fascinating. And for me, it's all about really, ultimately, for all of us, it really comes down to the essential, and it's a cliche, but it's true, the search for self, the answer to the question, who am I and why am I here? And whether that answer is an emotional one, a psychological one, a spiritual one, a metaphysical one, or even a sociological or a political one. You can put that many different screens over those questions. But that's if I boiled the essence of my work down, it probably all comes down to somebody, somewhere in some form, asking who am I and why am I here?
Yeah, no, I can definitely detect that in your work. And I think that's why I gravitate to your work so much, where really has that appeal for me, because, some of my favorite writers are very much within that wheelhouse as well. I love Damon Lindelof. What he did with Watchmen was unbelievable. Did you watch it?
I did.
Oh my God, right?
I was very resistant to watching it because I just thought, what are they going to do with Watchmen? It's not even set in back, in the watch. And my wife watched it first. It's very funny that she said, I'm going to watch this. And I was like, I don't even want to see it. And then she said, you really should watch this. And she watched the whole thing and then watched it again with me because she liked it so much. Amazing. And it really was extraordinary. It's some of the best television I've seen in a very long time. And this is from someone who is going in grudgingly, very, very well done. Lindelof, I was a big fan of Lost. And
Me too, man.
You can complain about how Lost ended, and I certainly have. But when you look at the bigger picture of what they achieved with that show was groundbreaking in so many ways.
Oh, yeah.
I can forgive lapses in the parts if the whole brings me something of meaning, And Lost as a whole really worked, even if, as I said, I could complain loudly about perhaps the last season. But it does. In the big picture, it doesn't matter. It was such a good show, and it did so many interesting, wonderful things, and really changed television in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it was great. Actually, right before I started watching Lost, I just ended a recent engagement with my partner. And honestly, during that relationship, I'd kind of lost my connection to some of the things that I was in, as far as different aspects of culture, whether it be stuff I was reading, stuff I was writing, stuff I was watching, stuff I was listening to. I kind of lost that. And Lost was the first thing that I kind of reconnected to. And it was like almost like an emotional tone poem. Like I almost experienced every human emotion you possibly could as I was watching that show. And it really helped me through that transition in my life. And I'll forever remember the show that way. Like that's what it'll always mean to me.
That's interesting. So you were lost, but by watching Lost, you were found.
Yes, sir.
I'm kidding.
Sir.
That's great.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. So I wanted to talk to you about this Deathstroke project. Now, I watched it. I enjoyed it. It was quite good. Lots of big pluses for this movie. The voice acting was phenomenal. The writing was fantastic. the action sequences that you guys put together. The direction was amazing. I love the fact that it was clearly like this art. Like, how else can you do Deathstroke but like not make it an R-rated movie? So you guys were smart about that, and you gave the fans exactly what they wanted. And I love that you're the guy who got to write this, because I really get a feeling from you that, like, you really valued the duality in your characters. And if
Exactly.
and normally my normal experience with Deathstroke has been as this kind of kung fu Zen master, very kind of reserved and really only spoke when he had to. But you kind of did this different kind of character design over Deathstroke, and I almost got the feeling that you were watching a lot of The Shield, and a lot of Vic Mackey kind of bled into this character.
That's very interesting. I have never watched The Shield in my entire
Really?
life, but I was I know Michael Chiklis's work for sure, and I was very glad that he did the voice. But you're right. It's always about digging into the character and finding those things that we've been talking about, the duality, or or the layers and levels, the contradictions. Deathstroke was not a character that I was intimately familiar with. Obviously, I was familiar with him because I write comics. And I know, all right, that's Deathstroke. He's over there. He's a super assassin. I remember, because I used to reading Teen Titans back in the day, when he first appeared there via the genius of Marvin George.
Yeah, me too.
But I didn't really know the character. So I had to do, they sent me a bunch of stuff to read, and I had to do, thank God for, Wikipedia and online, and read the characters' multiple histories, because they keep rebooting and changing these things. So what I did was, based on what I read in the stories, based on what I read online, pulled out elements that I thought were interesting to me about the character, and basically built a new story from that. There was one story where his son was kidnapped, but it was a very, very different story. Right. But I like that element, because what really drew me in was the dysfunction of the family.
Yes.
That's what the movie is about. It's the ultimate ugly divorce story, and the damage that it does to these two people in this marriage, the damage that it does to the children, and how in some small way can they try to heal this rift and come back together in some shape or form. So while all the action is going on, and the jumping and kicking and slicing and blowing up and all that other stuff, which you have to do in a Deathstroke story, I hope that what people get underneath that is a very human story. And again, contradiction. Deathstroke, the way I played it in the movie is he sees himself as one thing, despite the fact that he's out in the world doing some really terrible stuff. Yep. He views him, he has to, which everyone rationalizes. Everyone finds a way to make what they do acceptable. Except perhaps those of us who come from a background that both has Jewish guilt and Italian guilt in it. So it's impossible, because we're always flogging ourselves with guilt. But other people, like Deathstroke, so he's rationalized a way to be in the world. And one of his journeys in the story is to come to the point where he sees through his rationalizations to who he is and what he does, and how can he possibly even begin to make amends for what he's done, not just in the world, but more importantly, what he's done to himself and his family. Yeah.
And he doesn't, it's not him that pays for his sins. It's his family. His family is the ones that are paying for all the sins, basically. And some sins we don't even know about until, later on down the story. Now, you really did a good job of humanizing him and making him more relatable to the audience.
Oh, thank you.
That opening scene where he's talking to his wife, and they're talking about this affair, and then you see him open up his suitcase to read his son a book that he actually brought along. So you're kind of like, okay, this guy's a scumbag. And then you see him open up his suitcase, and he has a kid's book in there so he could read to his kid while he's on the road. Like it's this very quick transition in tone and duality to kind of continue to humanize the character very well. That's what I kind of took away from it.
Right, because he loves his son.
Oh, for sure.
And he loves his wife, in his way. And, what he does is Deathstroke is compartmentalized over in a corner there. What happened with the affair years before, well, that to him, that was years before, and that's in his little compartment. And
Yep.
a lot of people live their lives like that.
A lot of people.
Probably a lot of these sociopaths that are out there right now running the world.
You mean politicians? Yeah.
Yeah, live their lives like that too. They just do this stuff and they pop it in a little compartment and they put it away.
Yep.
They don't think about it, and they don't really care. But the fun of a story is letting those compartments blow up and forcing the character to face them and deal with them, while at the same time obviously having a big globe-spanning adventure story.
Yeah, no, it was a hell of an adventure story for sure. When Adeline speaks to Slade and they're saying goodbye, he says "I love you," but she doesn't say "I love you." Can you speak to that? Was that like a conscious decision?
Scene are we talking about?
Sorry, when they're getting off the phone after he's read the book to Joseph, and Slade says "I love you, Mrs. Adeline Wilson," and she says back, "And I adore you, Slade Wilson." Like, was that a conscious thing? Like,
that she didn't say "I love you"? No. I think the
Okay.
"I adore you" was very sincere on her part. She really does adore this man. So that was for her was the same as saying "I love you."
Okay, very cool.
But you know what? You can project anything you want into this stuff, and it can work, because there could be some level of her consciousness, talking about duality, where she's holding that back. So it's easier to say "I adore you" than to say "I love you." So that could be just as valid an interpretation.
It could be. Yeah, that's definitely what I kind of took from it.
Okay, that's fine. I accept that.
You also did a good job of setting up his code. Like, you gave him a code as being like, even though he was an assassin, a hired mercenary, you gave him a code. And you made it very clear to the audience that there were certain lines he wasn't willing to cross. And he almost you also made it very clear that in his own self-delusion, he felt he was doing good for the world.
Right. In that opening sequence where he's in this South American country and essentially believing he's on the side of the angels in this revolution that's going on down there, while he is slaughtering people left and right. And there's a line later on where one of the villains says to him, it says, and Deathstroke is talking about, in essence, the nobility of his cause. And he says, "I'm sure the widows and the children of the men that you killed down there don't feel the same way,
Yes.
But there's the compartmentalization again. Well, means to an end. I had to do this, and this is the way I had to do it. And yet there's, there's just a mounting body count with this guy.
Yeah. Did you have in mind, like when you were going through, how you were going to kind of organize that character's morality, did you use any references from the real military world? Like, did you think back and kind of put yourself in the shoes of like an actual soldier who might have had to carry out orders that he didn't want to carry out, but he had to do it? Like, was that?
You do that with every character. You hope you have to actually be, as if you're a writer, you have to be a little crazy to do this.
Yeah.
Because you have to become these people. So I have to become Deathstroke and completely understand his mindset. And part of that mindset was his military training. And then when he's out of the military, as he expresses in the story, he didn't know what the hell to do. True. And then he sees the results. We don't want to give away too much to anyone that hasn't seen this. He sees the results of the experiment.
Oh, this is going up on a spoiler review, so don't worry about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
He sees the results of what they did to him when he turns into this thing, and all he knows how to do is kill, essentially, and to do it for God and country and quote high ideals. So in his own way, he is continuing to do that as Deathstroke. Sure, they're paying him a lot of money to do it, but a man's got to live, right?
Yeah.
At least in his mind.
Now, the antagonist, the Jackal.
Yeah.
You made him not too far removed from Deathstroke himself. Mm-hmm. It was almost like he had a very slight, more of an arc than a hockey stick over into the evil side. You know what I mean? Like it was just a slight adjustment. I really thought that was interesting, and you really did a lot of good exposition about the Jackal's very kind of nihilistic view of almost everything. Like he was definitely had this very nihilistic kind of almost anarchist where let the chips fall as they may. Like I really don't care. In many
ways, he is a more honest version of Deathstroke, right?
That's true. That's true.
Because I'm an assassin for hire. This is what I do. I'm not hiding it. I'm not wrapping it up in some self-delusional mythology. This is what I am, and this is what you are. And that's what he's trying to bring out to him in the beginning. You might as well be on our side because you do the same exact thing and you're very good at it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I wanted to ask you about the Shining Knight reference in the book. Was that a DC Easter egg for Sir Justin?
No, not at all. Not at all.
No, that was accidental? Wow.
No, that was just I created this idea of the storybook and I came up with a little story of the night.
Cool.
And I wasn't thinking about anything beyond that.
So there's a time jump in the story, and again, you take us right back to where Deathstroke lives morally, and he's taking down this den of human traffickers, and he rescues these women that have been kidnapped and are going to be sold into sex trafficking or whatever. And you humanize them even more. Like, it was very hard to not like Slade Wilson in this iteration. It's very easy to dislike Slade Wilson in other iterations because he's going up against your favorite characters, right? One. Right. And two, he's so stoic and he's so Kung Fu the Legend continues with everything he says that you really get nothing beyond the surface of his Zenisms. Like, you really get nothing from him. There's no emotion. You know, in the Judas Contract, he betrays little Tara, and that's really the only kind of emotional beat you get from Deathstroke. He's not really an emotional character, but he did a great job of like really kind of layering this guy and giving us places to go with him, because I really didn't expect for this to be as complex as it was.
Oh, like, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. I couldn't write a story about a character the way you described that character.
That's good. Neither can I.
Because we're and there have to have been, I'm sure, over the years, Deathstroke stories that delved into the character in a deeper way.
Of course, yeah.
I'm not that familiar with the history, so I don't know. And but where's the interest in a character who's, there's a certain sort of action movie, right, where the main character is just this sort of machine and off he goes, and that's what the movie is about. But those aren't the kinds of stories that interest me. That's to me, that's the least interesting story I could ever possibly tell. Even this style of action movie is not really in my wheelhouse. So it was a challenge for me and that's what becomes fun sometimes, because I don't come up with the choice of which movie I'm going to be working on. I inevitably I get a call from someone at Warner Brothers Animation saying, "You're interested in doing this." And I'm a freelancer, so I'm always interested in doing this, because that's my job, unless it's something that is so outside my wheelhouse that I can't find a way in, Yeah. So this sort of like almost James Bondian action movie.
Lots of good spycraft. I liked all the spycraft.
And well, here's the funny thing that happened. When I was like 5th, 6th, 7th grade, I was in love with James Bond. I loved those. I read all those books. I devoured the movies, and that was a passion of little me years and years and years ago, And then on a whim, a couple of years ago, I decided, I'd like to reread some of those books and see how they hold up. So I think I reread 3 or 4 James Bond books, which sort of popped that back in my consciousness again. So that when I started working on Deathstroke, Bond was swimming around in my unconscious, And there was one scene that is very much a Bond tribute, which is the underwater fight.
Yes, I picked up on that. Yeah, I was like, this is so
It's a very Thunderball moment,
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
But so I was, the 12-year-old James Bond fanatic in my soul was very, very happy to do that. So that was really fun. But that kind of helped me to find my way into a type of story that isn't necessarily my forte. But you want to have as many tools in your toolkit as a writer as possible. So when someone approaches you with a story that may not be exactly what you're comfortable with, you will learn and you will grow by doing it.
True.
True. And that's Deathstroke for me. One of the big challenges. The character stuff is never a challenge for me. That's the easy part. That's just what I do. It's very natural for me. I just naturally blow off the top of the character's head and stick my hands in and pull out their psyche and study it. I can do that really easily. But there are other things that maybe aren't as easy for me. So getting a chance to try to write this kind of action movie was a challenge. The stuff at the end where they're leaping out of the plane and, all that stuff
The
going
wingsuits?
on.
Oh, the wingsuits were gangster.
Yeah,
Gangster.
it was really fun.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to find that one has the ability to do something that isn't natural for oneself necessarily. But as a storyteller, you want to be able to shift and turn and deliver what people want. And yet the trick is to still be true to yourself. So for me, being true to myself is making sure that the characters are deep and multi-layered and interesting.
Well, you definitely achieved that because they were definitely layered and very interesting and complex and kind of kept you guessing at times as far as, what were the true motivations beneath the surface. So that's always a good journey to go on. The one thing I kind of noticed was this family trinity between Slade, Rose, and Joseph or Jericho. Mm-hmm. How much was this influenced by what's happening on the last season of Titans? Because that was a huge part of their story for the last season of Titans. I don't know if you knew that.
Have not seen it, so not influenced at all. But
okay.
You have to realize, I probably wrote this before Titans even came on. But from when I write these things to when they actually come out is sometimes a year and a half or more.
That makes sense, yeah, because they got to do all the artwork, right? That makes
there's all this animation to be done. So when I turn in the script, but then the directors get their hands on it, and there's a whole process. And sometimes because a lot of that stuff is done elsewhere, and I'm in New York. Sometimes I am involved in those later stages, and sometimes I'm not. With Deathstroke, what was fun was when anything came up when they needed something, instead of like having someone else just rewrite it, they always came back to me. There were a couple of times when they said, our timing came up a little short. We need a scene here and a scene here. Can you give us a couple of new scenes? Sometimes they would turn to someone else to do something like that. Mm-hmm. So I got to see all the animatics, which are the little sort of the rough draft versions of the animation, and was able to comment on that and give them my feedback. So it's always great when you can be included every step of the way like that.
Very cool. What was your first reaction to that first scene where Slade literally chops a guy up into sashimi?
What I've noticed with animation in general is I will write an action sequence, whatever it is, and then the directors and the animators come along and they just blow the thing up to gnarly. Points of oh my God, really? They did that? All that blood, all the limbs. It's years ago when I was working on Justice League Unlimited, there was an episode that I really loved working on, and it had a big battle between Superman and Captain Marvel. Mm-hmm. And so, I wrote this battle scene, but boy, when they were done with it, this was like such a massive, it's so that's what the directors and the animators do, is that they will take it and they will add these visual touches and they will push things to the extreme. And I know, Deathstroke, like the Constantine movie that I wrote, started out on CW Seed. Right. There's a shortened version that's running on CW Seed, the first half anyway. Mm-hmm. And I know for Seed, for this and Constantine, they were like, we want to push this as far as we can push it. This is an adult thing. We want to, we're going to push. They really wanted to push the violence and the adult aspects of the story. Don't hold back, But no matter how much I push, this is so far I'm going to push. And then, they take that ball and they run with it.
Yeah, no, that was okay. So when I saw that scene, I was like, all right, I'm going to buckle myself in because this is going to get interesting very quickly. And then in the next scene, there's like blood raining down on him. And then in the next one, he's got a guy's head in his hands. I was like, all right, DC Animated Universe, here we go. Let's rock and roll.
I write a scene like that, and that's sort of an example of this is not necessarily in my wheelhouse, but this is what this character and this particular story needs. Beats like this, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So you serve the story. The story's not serving me in what I prefer. I have to serve the characters in the story, and it's a big. He's basically a super spy as far as I'm concerned.
He is.
But, so you have to write that kind of story, and I'm glad it worked.
Oh, it did, man. It did. It blew my hair back. I'll tell you that right now. So the other thing I noticed is with the character of Jericho, you guys changed his power set a little bit. Can you talk about that?
Well, I know he had different powers back in the day, but then they revamped the character. So one of the stories that they gave me to read, Jericho's powers were more psychic. In nature. Okay. So I thought, that's interesting, and that makes him more dangerous.
Okay.
That makes him a weapon to be used.
Very much so. Yeah.
And so I leaned into that. And that's that, and it works. I think it works in context of the story.
It definitely does. Like, the demonstration he does of his actual physical telekinesis was like, okay, this guy is a literal weapon. Like, it kind of made me flash back to, the Dark Phoenix in the X-Men saga. Like, this guy has some serious powers, and he's only just starting they're only starting to manifest now. Like, this is going to get crazy. So
right, I think there's a line that the Hive Queen says to Deathstroke where she says, you're a handgun. He's a nuclear bomb. Something like that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well done. I really like that one. Now, the Rose character, I found her the most interesting and the most complex because she's doing what she's doing out of the love for her brother. Like, that's what the takeaway is that, she, like, long before they even knew about each other or met each other, there was this mental connection. You talk about that, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I guess she relives Joseph's story kind of through that connection.
Right.
And and then the Jackal, I guess, finds her, and then she sees an opportunity to get back at the Jackal for what he did to her brother.
Right.
But at the same time, you kind of get the feeling that she's trying to balance what's left of her soul morally, because, like, she almost feels like almost completely engulfed in vengeance.
Right. And yet I think in her mind, she's sort of, this is a healing act with Joseph to take him and nurture him this way. And she too has to face later in the story the idea that maybe her motivations weren't as pure. She really truly loves her brother, but she also was using him.
Yes.
She was using him as well, and she has to face that. Doesn't mean she loves him any less, and doesn't mean he doesn't forgive her and love her in return. But all these characters sort of have to face, especially Rose and Deathstroke, have to face that moment of, like, maybe I am not completely what I've been telling myself I am.
Right.
There's who we believe we are, and there's who we are. And there's multiple levels of even that, of who we are. There's so many levels of who we are. What's the core of who we are? But for the purposes of the story, these characters have to face that. But that's a way, when you face that limitation, when you face your own delusions about yourself, that's the doorway into some kind of growth.
Yes.
So my belief is that all these characters will continue to grow from here. I basically had to. This is like as if DC was rebooting the character from square one. I was approaching like this. This is a Deathstroke movie, a standalone movie. It's not connected to anything else. It wasn't even connected to the broader DC animated universe. It's just a Deathstroke story. So I had to look at all these things that I found that I thought were interesting, and essentially reboot the character myself and come up with my own version of the Deathstroke story, which other people can build on or ignore. It's up to them. But I hope within the context of the story that people that are fans of the character enjoy the story that we got to tell.
Well, I think they will, to be honest, because, I'm going to go back to this Vic Mackey Shield thing, because Vic Mackey was a character that led a dual life. He's a corrupt cop that, doesn't take his work home with him. His family does not know of all the shit that he gets into. It's quite crazy, actually, how far he goes in to reach his goals within the context of his job. And I kind of felt the same way with this character. Like, you guys casted this guy, you guys casted Deathstroke perfectly, because because Michael Chiklis can play this dual facing character all day long, because he did it for 9 seasons, and he did it to the point where he won awards for it, and that voice and the performance. So, I'm
sure that's why they cast him. Like I said, I was not familiar with the Shield. I mean, I knew it existed, and I know that he won all these accolades for the part. To me, I love him for being the Thing. Whatever you think of those Fantastic Four movies, he was
a great Thing.
He was perfectly cast as the Thing and did a fantastic job in that. Yeah, but so I'm sure that's why. That's probably, now that you're explaining this, that's probably why they cast him.
Yeah, no, like that's what I said to myself. I was like, okay, so like when I saw the trailer, I was like, Michael Chiklis is Deathstroke. I was like, Michael Chiklis is way too big a personality for the Deathstroke that I know. But then when I saw your interpretation, I was like, okay, this works, because you kind of gave him more of an army grunt kind of feel to him than, say, like a ninja Zen master. Like that's kind of the vibe that I got, and it worked, dude. It was great. It really was great.
Great. I have to say, in general, with the DC animated stuff, and especially these movies I've worked on in recent years, the voice casting, the voice direction, the performances, these people do not approach this like they're slumming, you know?
Not at all.
Oh, I'm doing an animated movie. Let me just go in for the day and cash my check. Just they all really go in and they give their all to this. And I'm always so impressed with the people that they cast and the job that these people do. You know, when I worked on the Constantine City of Demons movie, you know, I got Matt Ryan to be Constantine again for the animated version.
Amazing.
And, you know, and he loves that character, and he put heart and soul into that. And just like the same thing with that movie, every part, no matter how small, was really, really well played.
Yeah.
Just really excellent, really excellent.
I feel like the entire DC animated universe is a love letter to the fans. That's how I see it. And honestly, we actually did a self-contained episode about animation itself. And one of the points that I made in that episode is that it saddens me that there's not more big theatrical releases for these animated properties. You know, I like me myself, I would have loved to go see Superman Red Sun in the theater. I would have loved that, you know, but for some reason, I guess, you know, because of the fact that animation still kind of carries a stigma for some adults, it's just not as mainstream or welcomed as obviously live action stuff is, which is kind of sad, because, you know, the action the budget in you know, as it relates to the spectacle that you can create with an animated feature is, you know, much more manageable than, say, the spectacle you can create on the live action feature. You're much more, you know, you're not as limited by, you know, when you do animation, you can almost do anything you want, which would be great, you know.
And when you consider, you know, something like the Into the Spider-Verse movie, amazing. I'm surprised because as we're saying, removing myself from the equation completely, DC animation has been phenomenal. You know, since Batman the Animated Series, and I feel very lucky that I've gotten to participate in whatever way I can over the years, both on the TV shows and the movies. And since they've done such a brilliant job, guys like, you know, Bruce Timm and Alan Burnett and Jim Cregan, all these guys, you know, that Warner Brothers hasn't turned to them and say, here's a bigger budget, do a big budget animated movie for us.
I wish.
You know, look at Justice League Unlimited. There, you know, it's as good an iteration of the Justice League as has ever been done, and better than most. I mean, they understood those characters, and so why not give these guys the keys to the kingdom? You know, why not give these guys the keys and say, go do a live action movie and write it for us? You know, what are you doing? But certainly after you would think after Into the Spider-Verse, they would be tripping over themselves to go to these guys and say, give us a big animated movie that we can release in theaters. Well, frankly, I hadn't thought about that until you just brought it up, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah, well, with what's happening with COVID now too, like this almost makes complete sense, because, you know, you can actually put together an animated feature remotely. You don't need all these, you know, people together in one space. So, you know,
and you don't have to worry about your leads kissing or anything.
Exactly. There you go.
Not going to infect each other. It's okay.
There you go. And, you know, I'm glad you brought up Justice League Unlimited, because honestly, I could spend an entire episode talking to you about the work that you did on Justice League Unlimited. And I'd love to have you back to talk about it at some point, because Grudge Match is without a doubt one of my favorite episodes of all of the DC animated anything.
Really? That particular episode, I would have never guessed that. That's interesting.
Grudge Match is so good. It's so good. Just so good. And like the way that you balanced all those characters and still let them shine in their own moments and just so good, man. So good.
That was a great show. It was a great show. And that I
got
to be
show.
And it's a show that as the years have passed has taken on more and more of a classic status. And, you know, that I got to be a small part of that. I think I wrote maybe 7 episodes. I'm really glad that I was a part of that. And I have my friend Stan Berkowitz to thank for that, for bringing me in on that show. I worked primarily with Stan and with Dwayne McDuffie on that show.
Very cool. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, the fans love it, man. Like anybody I ever talk to, like Justice League Unlimited, if that conversation starts, it can go for hours. because it's just so beloved by the fans, and you know, that look, that particular look of animation is just so DC DNA now. It's ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
as soon as you see that jawline, you're like, okay, that's definitely, you know, Bruce Timm's, like Bruce Timm. That's the Bruce Timm look. So calling back to the Deathstroke film real quick, I like how you almost mirrored Rose with Slade and Adeline. And you even included Adeline in it too, because she's almost just as guilty of abandoning Joseph as Slade is.
Right.
And
It's the same thing. There's always that line, that interior line that gets crossed. You know, same thing. She loves her son. She thinks she's doing the best for her son. At the same time, she's, in some levels, she's doing the worst thing she could have ever done for her son. She's isolating him and leaving him alone and heartbroken.
Yeah, no. And you know, I really like how you kind of polarized with the Rose character, because the Rose character thinks she's doing good too. But, you know, in the context of, or sorry, in the mind of the viewer, she's the one that was supporting him and in a way kind of rescued him and, you know, gave him the support that he needed and the love that he needed. And then his birth parents were the ones that abandoned him. But she's part of the terrorist organization and they're not. And it's just this, it's just a very interesting structure between those characters, for sure.
You know, the fact that these characters are so larger than life allows you to take the real emotions of a dysfunctional family going through this kind of pain, and then just amplifying it, you know, to the point of like opera, you know? So that's the fun of these stories. But it always, as we keep saying, it always has to be grounded in real emotion and real human psychology and real human heart, or else it's empty, it's soulless.
I agree. No, I totally agree with you. The last thing I want to talk to you about this movie is something that I kind of picked up on, and as a New Yorker, I want to get your take on this. The terrorist attack that Hive carries out in the final act seems to mirror a lot of the events of 9/11 a little bit. And I wanted to know, as a New Yorker, were you kind of drawing from your personal experience from that?
Well, yeah, I grew up in New York City. I live in upstate New York, so I was not living in the city during 9/11, but I was, you know, but my roots are there, friends are there. So obviously we were all very connected to that, but having grown up in New York, certainly that impacted me. But really, as I was writing it, what I was remembering was that period when George Bush was up in a plane somewhere, you know, no one knew what was going on.
Yes.
And he was up in a plane somewhere. And I thought, well, that's interesting. If we unleash these terrorist events and the president is up there and he's vulnerable, really, he's more vulnerable than he would be if he was in the White House or something. And that's kind of what sparked the idea for that sequence, because, you know, you always need your big final action sequence.
True.
So it's like, well, what's it going to be? Where is this all leading? And then from there, you know, it unfolded into this whole aerial battle in the wingsuits and the whole thing, which was really fun to write.
Well done, sir. No, for sure. Because, like, you know, once you were playing with some of these visual nods to some of the things that happened on 9/11, and then you do this big thing with Air Force One, I was like, okay, this is going to end on a real freaking high note. So, like, I really, really love the way you put that scene together. So amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So before we jump off of Deathstroke here, can you tell me, who was your favorite character to write for this particular film?
Well, that's an interesting question. Who was my favorite character to write? You know, I have to say this one wasn't about one particular character. It was about the dynamic, the family dynamic, what was going on between all of them, the four of them. You know, the four of them were what was really, really interesting to me. It was looking at, obviously, at them as individuals and their own psychology and emotional states, and how that all played off into and against each other. They were like a bunch of billiard balls, really, the four of them, continually bouncing off each other and often hurting each other when that happened. So it was really the dynamic more than a specific character, the dynamic between the four characters that really fascinated me.
Well, Jam, thanks for sitting down and talking to us about Deathstroke and sharing, you know, your background and talking to us about your work and Moonshadow and all these super cool things. I understand that you have another project that you're working on called Godsend. Is there anything you can tell us about that?
I have right now, one of the things that's happened in the lockdown is that there were a bunch of creator-owned projects that have been sort of on the back burner, and I brought them all to the front burner. So I'm working on 4 different projects right now.
Oh, wow.
We just put out a little teaser for Godsend. You probably won't see it till next year. I put out a teaser on Twitter yesterday for another new project I'm working on. So I have like 4 different projects that I'm developing, originals, that I'm having so much fun with right now.
Very cool.
But I can't really talk about any of them. And I also got a call recently, potentially about another new animated movie for Warner Brothers.
Awesome.
So we'll see what happens with that. It's not a done deal yet. I'm waiting for the final word to come down. And in terms of stuff that's out there, along with Deathstroke, Superman Red Sun, which came out just before the lockdown, just in time to cancel the New York premiere, which was really, really disappointing because I was really looking forward to that. But that movie turned out really, really well.
Yeah.
I'm very, very happy with that. And then they just put out a DVD called Batman: A Death in the Family, which includes a bunch of DC Universe shorts.
Okay.
And I wrote 2 of those shorts. One was an Adam Strange short.
Oh, very cool.
And the other, you mentioned Neil Gaiman earlier, it was a Death short. Gaiman's Death character, that for the very first time that Death had been used in any other medium other than comics. And I enjoyed both of those shorts, but the Death one, I think, is one of the best things I've worked on in animation. Really, really loved working on that one. It turned out beautifully. It's almost like a little 20-minute Twilight Zone episode. It's really, really, really happy with that one. So there's a lot of stuff that's out there. And for folks that are looking for comic book work to read, just this past week from IDW, a Star Trek Hell's Mirror came out. Okay. Which is a Mirror Universe tale. The Mirror Universe tale of Kirk and Khan.
And you're a big Star Trek fan, right?
I'm a huge Star Trek fan, and I love Kirk and I love Khan. So to play with those characters and Spock in the Mirror Universe, it was really a thrill. And a couple of other collections that are out there along with Moonshadow is The Girl in the Bay, which came out last year from Berger Books, Karen Berger's new line at Dark Horse.
Very cool.
And a project I did for IDW, a more kid-friendly, big cosmic adventure called Impossible Incorporated. So very cool. That takes care of the plugs. And one more plug. I'm not done.
Yeah, go ahead, bud.
I do my writing workshops. They're called Imagination 101. Obviously, because of COVID, I can't do them in person anymore. So I am working to bring my writing workshop online, and I'm hoping to get it online by November or December at the latest. So anyone that follows me on Twitter or Facebook, I'll be getting the word out about that hopefully soon.
Very cool. You should talk to Jim Lee. Maybe he can set you up with that virtual space thing you did for DC Fandom, and you can just do it in there.
I found someone to host him. It's a new site called Comicsplex, and they're going to be hosting the workshop. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's fantastic. Well, JM, thanks for joining us to talk about Deathstroke. It's available now on Blu-ray. You can get it on Amazon and Google Play and all the different little streaming goodie sites. It's awesome. Please, guys, go check it out and come back to us. Let us know what you thought about it. You can drop us a line on Instagram at meanwhile_pod. There's all kinds of content up there for you to check out, and make sure you subscribe to the show. Well, guys, that's a wrap. Thank you for joining us for this spoiler hot review of Deathstroke, Knights and Dragons. Make sure you catch this movie. We're definitely recommending it. We think you guys will enjoy it. Thanks again to J.M. DeMatteis for joining us and sitting down with us to talk about the film. Really appreciate it, man. We're huge fans. And again, this episode was edited and produced by our amazing producer, Rafi Bedrosian. Thanks again, Rafi. Amazing work as always. We're going to sign off here. I'm Frank McGuire.
I'm Kristina.
I'm Saba.
Peace.